All right. Hello. The official beginning of a new workshop. We're going to get our done, as Larry the Cable Guy continually encourages us to do. Very good motivational speaker, Larry the Cable Guy. What is it in our lives that we must get her done? Well, let's explore some dungeons. Let's make a dungeon. What is a dungeon? What goes into a dungeon? What comes out of a dungeon? All this and more on the next episode. Well, where we left off, Bane, there was conflict where half-elves were involved with the gnomes and the dwarves. And we're going to go through a couple considerations that may continue to refine that idea. But before too long, I did want to go over some broader aspects of dungeons and their creation. The specifics are going to help us, absolutely. But there's a lot of new people who've been stopping into the workshop, and for some of you who've been hanging out here long enough, this is probably going to be just a refreshing lesson in the things that I have brought up before. If you are going to be participating in this workshop at home, please have your Dungeon Master's Guide ready. If you want your player's handbook open as well, then class, fetch your materials. You did bring your books to class, right? If you don't have them, feel free to stop by your local game store and pick up a player's handbook or a DMG. If they've earned your business, show them a little love and support, because I want to show you how to maximize every page out of these books. You know, over the course of every year we've been doing it, we have crawled through so much of the content. And I'd love to continue teaching. That's right. Now, if you don't happen to have a friendly local game store, or maybe they're not so friendly and they haven't earned your business, let me know, and I will do my best to get a book out to you. We will make an arrangement for it. All right, yeah, GMV, you've heard this stuff before. Get out of here and get some sleep, my friend. Thank you for hanging out with us. We're going to flip back and forth. Now, I'm on page 99 of the DMG. So you can open it if you want to go to 98 and you get this nice illustration, please. Yes, Coffee. That is tonight's workshop goal. On 99, though, we're going to get into Chapter 5, Adventure Environments. We're going to review this, and then there's a couple extra things that I would like to have you consider that will be extraneous to the Dungeon Master's Guide. Pardon. Many D&D adventures revolve around a dungeon setting. Dungeons in D&D include great halls and tombs, subterranean monster lairs, labyrinths riddled with death traps, natural caverns extending for miles beneath the surface of the world, and ruined castles. Not every adventure takes place in a dungeon. A wilderness trek across the Desert of Desolation, or a harrowing journey into the jungles of the Isle of Dread, can be an exciting adventure in its own right. In the great outdoors, dragons wheel across the sky in search of prey. Tribes of hobgoblins pour forth from their grim fortresses to wage war against their neighbors. Ogres plunder farmsteads for food, and monstrous spiders drop from the web-shrouded canopies of trees. Within a dungeon, adventurers are constrained by walls and doors around them, but in the wilderness, adventurers can travel in almost any direction they please. Therein lies the key difference between dungeon and wilderness. It's much easier to predict where the adventuring party might go in the dungeon, because the options are limited, less so in the wilderness. What we're going to be doing is a fusion of the two, because this is going to be an outdoor dungeon that I would like to plan with you all. And there will be elements of wilderness, I guess, or a more freer form of travel, though we're still going to make a dungeon. It may not be a classical dungeon similar to the examples above, but the concept will be dungeonesque. Some dungeons are old strongholds abandoned by the folk who built them. Others are natural caves or weird lairs carved out by foul monsters. They attract evil cults, monster tribes, and reclusive creatures. Dungeons are also home to ancient treasures, coins, gems, magic items, and other valuables hidden away in the darkness, often guarded by traps or jealously kept by the monsters that have collected them. And this is going to get into... Hey, Crispy, good to see you. This is going to be getting into some wonderful randomized tables, and we will draw upon these tables to an extent for the exercise, but we're not quite there yet, because there's a little bit more than just these considerations. And these are some solid ones, talking about a dungeon ecology, because there should be that. Things like encounter difficulty, features in your dungeon. These are parts of the detailing. We're not worried about the detailing just yet. Let's talk about the concept of a dungeon still, all right? The fundamental nature. This is... despite it being in an outdoor location, we still want to make sure that there is something that will keep our prospective party tethered to the location some way, somehow. And it will feature, maybe some wandering creatures, traps, or hazards, things like that. But a dungeon is more than just that. Even if we're planning the ecology of how things work, there are concepts to building a dungeon that I wanna give some focus to here. And there are two different methodologies that we can explore and discuss, and you can accept or reject as you like. The first I want to review with you is a dungeon checklist. Now, this is from Goblin Punch, okay? And this has some interesting considerations for you as a dungeon planner. What should a dungeon have? Now, are all these necessary? No, they're not. They're not necessary. These are good things to consider. A dungeon should have something to steal. Hey, Malice Conspiracy. Maybe a little bit of both. One might lead to the other, Malice. Treasure gives players a reason to go into the dungeon in the first place. On a metagame level, treasure is money, money is XP, and XP is tied to the idea of character advancement. It's the prime mover of the system. 2 points. First, remember that treasure doesn't need to be treasure. It can be shiny stuff, such as coins, or the jeweled brassiere of the zombie queen. Knowledge, such as where to find more treasure, or information you can use to blackmail the king, or even a sage who can answer a single question honestly. Friendship, such as an amorous purple worm that follows you around and protects you when it's hungry and a little bored. Occasionally, it leaves egg sacs laying around for, something to happen. For you to hatch by sitting on them and warming them. Trade goods, like a wagon full of tea that could be worth 10,000 gold pieces because tea might be an expensive commodity. When I give out large parcels of trade goods as treasure, I give half of the XP now and the other half of the XP when it's sold off, if you want to use experience points. Uh, uh, Treasure can be territorial. Like a tower, the players can claim as their own, or an apartment in the nice part of the city, and the chances of being stabbed in your sleep are dramatically reduced. Useful adventuring stuff like a magic sword, a scroll of blot out the sun, or a parachute. Second, treasure tells a story too. Cover your treasure in religious symbols, anoint it in troll blood. Don't let your coins be coins. Are there dates on the coins? Is there a face on the coin, or a suspicious lack thereof? The treasures are creations of someone for a purpose. It will have social cues or historical events, or it'll have some sort of artistic something to it. If you just describe gold coins as gold coins, that's all they're ever going to be. Now, there's a great function to that, though it can be so much more if you allow it to be, if you describe it to be. Something like that was brought up in the Chroma Company campaign. Coffee Cat is here and can vouch for it. Now, for reasons in the story, this was something that if people noticed it, they never really remembered it. But they started seeing some symbols that were on some old nails on a ship that were then reflected in coins that were from the same area that the ship was at, or had originated from. And it started creating some things to consider and link and put together. And it was also, that was also setting up a theme for later of, there's so much going on around us, why weren't we aware of it? Or were we, and we just let it sort of slip our minds? Because when you saw it, all of a sudden you started seeing this stuff everywhere. And so it was a way to introduce that concept. So, treasure. I have to be careful. This is a tall, thin bottle, and she wants to be where this is, apparently. And even just a bapping tail is going to make my night a sad night. Something to be killed. This is pretty obvious. Of course, there are threatening things in the dungeon. There has to be some challenge, otherwise it isn't a dungeon. The simplest way to do this is with things that are trying to kill you. Yes, you can have monsterless dungeons based on traps. Those are cool. That's why the checklist is written in pencil and not in stone. There are many ways to make combat with even basic monsters more interesting. Also, remember that dungeons tell their story through nouns. The history of a dungeon is usually relayed through monster choices. Why use orcs when you can use degenerate cannibal versions of the original dwarven inhabitants? And descriptions of those creatures: a barnacle-covered zombie, an iron golem charred by dragonfire, the elven armor scraps that the goblins are wearing, the elven wand rifle that one of the goblins has for some reason. Something to kill you. Yeah, Lisa's up on here. There wasn't too much stock, but at the time there wasn't necessarily a reason for it. But I wanted to continue to play into it and build it so that you were making connections and you were seeing it more and more, because you have these little points that you could eventually connect and see there's a whole lot more going on. John Erico, hello. Why use orcs when you can use gnolls like me? Gnolls are fine too. As the saying goes about cats, right? Meow. I'm just getting a look. All right. Something to kill you. Dungeons are designed to be beaten. That's why we don't fill them with inescapable obstacles. Rocks fall, everyone dies. Or impenetrable barriers. Sorry, the whole dungeon is wrapped in an adamantine dome. You can't get in. But dungeons need to feel like they were designed to be unbeatable. It's important to feel like this, isn't just a bowling, my cadence is off for the sentence. It's important to feel like this isn't just a bowling alley where the DM sets up the pins for the players to knock down. You need to have deadly elements in your deadly dungeon for it to feel deadly. Just follow these two important rules. Try to follow at least one. Label your deadly stuff as such. a sleeping dragon, a door barricaded from the player's side with a sign warning of deadly spiders. These things look deadly from a distance. And, or, a chance to escape. Maybe the dragon can't fit into the smaller tunnels around his lair. Maybe the manticore is chained to a rock. Both of these serve the same function. They allow the players to pick their own battles, something you can't do on a linear railroad game. I think that's why a lot of OSR folks hate the idea of boss battles, because they're the one battle in the dungeon that is required. Horrible monsters that are avoidable give the players agency and allow them to be architects of their own demise. Side note, I think that nearly all combats should be escapable. Sometimes with a cost, dropped food, gold, maybe a dead PC or hireling. In my experience, PCs will get themselves killed often enough if the enemies never left the rooms they were in. Also, putting quote-unquote unbeatable monsters in your dungeon also allows for the dungeon to be self-scaling. The level 1 party will just tiptoe past the dragon, while the level 6 party might consider fighting it, so they steal the treasure it is sleeping on top of. And just like that, a dungeon becomes appropriate for both level 1 parties and level 6 parties. And this is another reason why I think OSR games have such a wide range of level appropriateness. It's both easy and expected that players will flee from fights they can't win. Different paths. Number 4. Different paths allow different parties to experience the dungeon in different ways. It's a randomizer, similar to what you'd get if you ordered the dungeon rooms according to a random number generator, and it keeps you, the DM, from getting bored. Player agency. Players can choose the path they're better suited for. The party with 2 clerics can take the zombie-infested tunnel, and the party with air support can get themselves dropped into the courtyard. It also allows dungeons to be a little bit self-adjusting too. Players who are more confident can challenge the front door, while lower-level parties will creep around the outside. It allows parties to walk away from the rooms they don't like. Part of the OSR philosophy, as I see it, is the ability to walk away from fights. If a party doesn't want to fight a room with archer skeletons entombed in the walls, especially after 2 of them were blinded in the last room, they can retreat and find another way in. It's an option they have. The last reason to have multiple paths is to allow for dungeon mastery. I don't mean DMing. I mean that as the players learn more about the dungeon, they become better at exploiting its geography. They can lure the carrion crawler over the pit trap that they know is there. They can retreat into a looped path instead of retreating into unexplored rooms, always a dangerous tactic. At the same time, don't throw in random paths just for the heck of it. The more paths you put in, the less linearity there is in your dungeon, and sometimes you want linearity, especially when it comes to teaching your players things or giving clues. Sometimes you want to show the players the eerily clean hallway before they pump into the gelatinous cube. Maybe you want them to meet the zombies with hook hands before they meet a room of crawling animated hands. There's nothing wrong with a little linearity if you're putting it in there for a reason. I still think that a heavily branched dungeon should be the default assumption, but linear sections of a dungeon are a venal sin, not a mortal one. Someone to talk to. People forget this one, and yet it's the one I feel strongest about. Strong enough for caps lock. Every dungeon needs someone to talk to. It is a role-playing game. NPCs are the cheapest and easiest way to add depth to your dungeon. It's easy because everyone knows how to roleplay a generic goblin prisoner and has a pretty good idea of what information or services that goblin prisoner can provide. And it's got depth because there are so many ways that a party can use a goblin prisoner. There's almost no bloat. You don't need to invent new mechanics, and it takes almost no space to write, quote, "There's a goblin in a cage. His name is Zerglum, and he has been imprisoned by his fellows for setting rats free," unquote. The problem is that a lot of dungeons are treasure vaults, tombs, and abandoned mines. The only creatures you usually encounter in those places are undead, golems, oozes, and vermin with ambiguous food chains. None of those are really known for being chatty. So, Here are some options. A rival adventuring party. Goblins never need explanation. A spell effect like a chatty magic mouth spell or something. A graveyard nymph. I guess there's a link to that monster. Ghosts. Make a sympathetic one. Everyone expects them to be jerks. A ghoul head sitting on a shelf. It can talk if you blow air through its neck hole. Have you thought about something like that? If the ghoul is capable of speaking and telling you a lot of things, who in the party is brave enough to take the ghoul head and make sure you're blowing air through its, over its vocal cords so it can speak again? Because its lungs are long gone. An old man trapped in a painting communicates by painting. A demon trapped in a mirror communicates by repeating your own phrases back to you. An ancient war machine trapped by a stasis field bomb seeks enemies who died thousands of years ago, will self-destruct when it learns that it lost the war. Consider giving your players speak with stones or speak with lock spells. Dungeons usually have those. Demonic succubus who has spent the last 1,000 years on a bed trapped by the silver threads woven into a circle on the bed sheet. A pterodactyl riding barbarian, plural, pterodactyl riding barbarians who are looting the place. A time-displaced wizard caught in a paradox while exploring the place. Resets every 3 minutes. Examples, of cool or gross or kind of mufu. We have a mufu. Let me get a mufu for you. There's a mufu. It tells a story, however. There's an interaction. Something to experiment with. Aside from something that will probably kick the party's butt, I think this might be the most OSR-ish. These are the unexplainable, the weird, and the unknown. Hello, Valexion. And I don't mean unknown like unidentified potion is unknown. I mean something that introduces a new wrinkle into the game. How about a room with 2 doors of different sizes? Anything that is put into the small door emerges from the large door at twice the size and vice versa. Anything that goes through the doors twice in the same direction, double enlarged or double shrunk, has terrible consequences. A pedestal. If anything is placed on top of it, it turns into its opposite. Alright, the opposite of sword is an axe, but what is the opposite of a banana? And Bane, there you go. So Artemis, if Artemis was running this dungeon, Artemis would tell you Bane, and a Nenab appears. How about a metal skeleton? If a skull is placed atop it, a Speak with Dead spell is cast on it. So the metal skeleton is a spell casting device that will make any skulls, it'll just turn any skull into, well, ask me some questions. Wishing wells that are portals to other small ponds in the dungeon. Where the portal goes is determined by what item you throw in the well before you jump in. Copper coins, silver coins, gold coins, gems, and arrows all lead to different places. 2 doorways. Impassable when you walk through a single one, but if 2 people walk through them simultaneously, they are fused together and transported to a city of similarly fused people. A machine that turns finished products into raw goods and raw goods into ammunition. A sundial that controls the sun. A boat golem that flees from loud noises. You can direct it by standing at the back of it and shouting. 2 holes in the wall. If 2 limbs are put in the holes, they are swapped. If only 1 limb is put in the hole, it is severed. It can be used to graft new limbs onto amputees. There's some overlap here with magic items. There's also some overlap with non-magical stuff too. There's also some overlap with combat because some combats can be puzzly or can rely on new rules or victory conditions. Combat for experienced players, for the most part, is a solved problem. Weird stuff is important because they give the players an unsolved problem. Players know how to best leverage their attacks and their abilities. Sure, you can mix it up a bit and force them to think and use different tactics, but by and large, they already know how to use their character to their best effect. They've been practicing it for levels and levels after all. It's important to let player practice the stuff they're good at, i.e. combat with their character, but it's also important to throw some wrenches in there too. Weird stuff follows its own rules. Suddenly, players don't know anything about how to solve this problem, and they have to figure it out anew. Bonus points if it's something that could potentially unbalance your game. Nothing gives a player more agency than the ability to completely derail your setting. Not that you need to go that far. Warning, yes, this is true. Also, yes, this is true. So, you can include it, but, if you want to, does every dungeon need a limb swapping portal? No. You are not compelled to put it in there. And if you think it's going to destroy your game, or it's just going to be a weird, unspeakable thing that whatever it feels disjointed, you don't need to do it. But beware that there could be things that might be unbalancing, or could be a giant revelation that might change the tone of your game. More bonus points if it's something that will probably hurt the players at first, but can be used to their advantage once they've figured out how it works. One last perk, it gives level 1 characters a chance to be as useful as level 10 characters. Anyone can stick an arm into a hole in the wall, and anyone can figure out what it does. Weird stuff often poses threats and rewards that are level agnostic. And lastly, something the players probably won't find. This one might be contentious. Why put stuff in your dungeon that your players won't find? First, you don't have to put much in the dungeon. Just a few words here and there to reward the players who are more thorough. Inside the purple worm's stomach is a bag of holding full of 1,000 gallons of purple worm stomach acid. Or, the pirate captain has a gold bar hidden in his peg leg, wrapped in felt so that it won't rattle. It's not like you're designing multiple cool rooms that no one will ever get to enjoy. I mean, I do that sometimes. I think it's important to hide things because there is a sincere joy in exploration and testing the limits. If all of the things in a dungeon are obvious, why bother wondering what was at the bottom of the well? Is there anything interesting buried beneath all this mud? Players who don't have the time or resources to explore a dungeon 100%, and they shouldn't, will always walk away with a feeling of enormity, that there was always more to find. Sure, completion is a nice feeling, but so is wonderment. I like to reward people who are good at the game, and being good at finding things, thinking about where they might be, exploring those places despite the risk it involves, is one of the ways that a player can be good at D&D. It should be a spectrum. Some things, most things, should be out in the open. Some stuff should be hidden behind curtains. And some stuff should be tucked deeply away in the dungeon's folds. So yeah, the next time you decorate a room with a mural of a defeated king presenting tribute to his conqueror, be sure to put an actual treasure chest in the wall behind the painting of a treasure chest. I've run that dungeon 3 times and no one has ever found it. I get a little excited every time I describe it to players. There's also undead skeletons entombed in the wall behind the paintings of skeletons. No one's ever found them either. But someday, some party with the right alloy of greed, cleverness, and patience will find them, and it will be great. Yeah, Bane players are too attached to their characters, and decapitating them every once in a while, it kind of it limbers everyone up, kind of makes them a little loosey-goosey, Valexian says something the players probably won't find: the BBEG's diary in a hidden library behind a fireplace, only openable if one does something in another nearby identical room. Yeah, so it's something that it's not needed. Like, they can clear the dungeon, they can succeed and walk away and still feel successful. But if they get that bonus because they went out of their way or accidentally did something or purposely did something, then that will feel even more amazing. But this is the this is the big takeaway, in my opinion. that feeling of enormity, because there's always more to the world than what you're presented. And if you have at least a faint margin of the world always just in or off the periphery of your player characters, the world is infinitely large because you can only observe so much. And you can absolutely offer that feeling of completion. And if you can weave into that feeling of wonderment, then so much the better. Now, a more mechanical approach to dungeon design. The first was conceptual, right? These are things that a dungeon would do well to have, and these are the reasons why. Especially if you want to present an amazing time to your players through the characters, and even have fun yourself as the DM. Are they going to find the treasure behind the painting this time? Are they going to find the skeletons behind the painting this time? Are they going to find the fireplace that Valexian talked about and and find the BBEG's diary? And good morning to you, Phil. Yeah, so Phil is tagging in Bane. Bane is going to tag out for the night. And also, Bane, I did see earlier, you said that, why won't my players ever avoid a fight? They think they should be able to beat anything they come up against. So there is kind of that linearity or a video game feel to a lot of the D&D content, as tabletop has influenced video games have influenced tabletop, and it kind of goes back and forth. Or there's the point like, oh, my DM would never put something in front of me that we couldn't overcome. So clearly, if we're level 3 and there's a gargantuan red dragon sleeping on a pile of gold, there must be a way for us to get the gold, right? There could be. I guess that depends on the cleverness of the party, but they're not going to brute force it. And if they want to, well, maybe the next party can find out another way around the charred bones after they've passed by themselves again. Yeah, so John, and a lot of stuff like that will probably come up in a session 0 and can be ramped into over the course of those first establishing levels. You know, like the usual like 1 to 3. If you're playing in 5th edition. Because by 3, everyone should have their subclass on their character, and that allows you to put the tonal, like a tonal, maybe not a shift, but just establish it in your game, and give some practice and hints along the way. And it's especially cool now if any of you out there can do this. If you can have your players revisit a location later in the game that they visited it at first when they were lower level or at the beginning, watch how they go back into that place and interact with it. And it can still carry the same level of excitement because maybe they're bringing in more knowledge about things, or they have more confidence where they had to just creep around and do a bare minimum just to get through. They might go through and it's a little bit more brazen or bold in some way. And if you can do that, you can go back and it's a part of a victory lap or a tour of something, and you can just go right back in there, revisit it, and you are enhanced or increased in some way as a party or as an individual character. You'll have the same dungeon experienced differently again. And I don't know, I'm a sucker for that kind of a thing. I pulled that off. At least I hope I pulled that off in the Chroma Company campaign in a couple different ways, and it gave at least me immense pleasure to be able to do so. Hopefully, my players enjoyed the that sort of thing as well. Goblin of Gygaxanor says my players need to know when to run away, and if not a blatant out of character discussion about that, Sometimes you need that hard smack in a combat where, no, this ogre is... I mean, sure, maybe if all of you roll crits all the time and you're sneaking in shots through its armor, maybe in that rare circumstance, yeah, you could bring it down. Or, unless they think super creatively out of the box and outwit you as the DM. I find that fun in just personally as a DM. But there are just some things that, yeah, your DM puts in front of you, but it's not going to happen, you know? Key says, I find people get insanely angry if you even challenge them, let alone punish the party if you throw something they can't beat. It's part of setting the expectation through out-of-character conversation or something in a session 0, or refreshing in a session 0, like halfway through the campaign and making sure there's a reset and a re-understanding, or through a gradual tonal shift from... you know, oh, it's eternal summer, and I'm the son of a farmer, and, you know, like, oh, it's the classic starting out, and, you know, oh, days of adventure. And then by level 10, you know, this person's already lost 3 friends and has grown, you know, kind of embittered and gritty, and is doing this, is still doing it for the love of, you know, his farm back home, but now that seems like a great distance away. You know, as he's as he pulls a tooth that has been knocked out in that last combat, and he remembers his childhood when he lost a tooth back as a little kid on the farm, you know, stuff like that. There's a tonal shift. Valexian says, sometimes you gotta place Bahamut early in Final Fantasy so the player knows running is sometimes required. That said, if the party finds a way past Deathclaw Valley in New Vegas, please reward them. Also, running may be the better option, but it should still be a challenge. Nobody wants to open a door to a sniper and just suddenly close it with no repercussions after the sniper notices them. They want to chase... Yeah, so something like a chase scene where it's a bit of a bait and switch. Like, combat! Nope. Whoop, 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 whoop. And then you can still have the challenge, the heart racing. You can use techniques or spells or whatever as it goes from what was supposed to be a combat into a chase. All right, now when you're constructing your dungeon, we had the concept of a dungeon. Let's construct the dungeon. This idea is called a 5-room dungeon. Now, the 5-room dungeon can still be 20 rooms. So, I mean, we're going to conceptualize it. It doesn't have to be just 5. An idea by John 4. It's a pattern for making quick dungeon delves. 5 simple steps, and you can get enough for at least a session around the kitchen table, maybe 2, and the heroes feel like they really earn their experience points. There's an example here. The idea was so good, Wizards of the Coast stole it for their example adventure, Kobold Hall, in one of their works. In the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Maps and stats aren't important. You can work those out after you have the sequence of the plot and challenges down. The idea is to hammer out like 3 or 4 of these while you're not paying attention in class, and then pick the best ones, polish them, and then add details later. You don't even need exactly 5 rooms, just 5 scenes in sequence. The 5 rooms are the entrance with Guardian, the puzzle or role-playing challenge, the trick or setback, the big climax, and then the reward and revelation. Entrance with Guardian. There has to be a reason why nobody else has come here before. It's difficult to get to, it's hidden, there's a guard posted outside, or a strange, big nasty decided the entrance makes for a good lair. Something only heroic types could overcome. An antagonist right away gets the player's excitement up and gets the dice rolling. Sometimes you can switch the first and second room if having a puzzle at the entrance makes more sense. So, examples. The entrance is trapped. There's multiple entrances, but only one is correct. The entrance requires a special key or ceremony, such as speak friend and enter. Or, even in a cyberpunk setting, the decker must hack the entrance. A guardian was deliberately placed at the entrance, a golem, a guard dog, a nightclub bouncer. A hidden ambush awaits in the shadows. A portcullis that the kobold guards can pass through easily, but the heroes must expose themselves to fit. Valexian says, opinions on the eaten by the bigger fish trope? When some boss is suddenly ended by a bigger threat that turns to the party. It can be a fun surprise. That could fall into the trick or setback, which then leads into the big climax, or like, my final form. Whether or not the actual creature turned into a final form, the final form would be the entrance of this bigger fish or some other Deus Ex Machina that had occurred. The puzzle or role-playing challenge. For those whose characters aren't the fighting types, the next area lets them show off the skill points they spent in diplomacy or spot checks. This pleases the players who didn't pick rangers and barbarians, and breaks up the pace a bit before getting back to the roar. Be sure to allow for multiple solutions, because playing the guess what I'm thinking game is boring for players. Once you figure out the puzzle here, go back to room 1 and put some clues. Now, this is something I personally enjoy. And I included it in the Chroma Company campaign, though the players weren't enthusiastic about riddles or puzzles. It could have been my selection of them, or the way I presented them, or just some people are like, no, please. I'm not the best at this, or how do I, even if I can't as the player, can you tell me how to interact with it through my character? Because there's a lot of us out there, and I'll put myself on blast for this. We may not be intelligent people, but we like running a character that has a 20 intelligence and is the brightest wizard, the valedictorian of wizard school. And so the character is going to know things that we as the player don't. How can you interface with that? Also, hello! Good Enough Painting coming in strong with a raid of 26. Welcome, painters. And let's get a shout out for Good Enough Painting. Heck yeah, a Good Enough Painting raid coming in with Nuffy the Blue Dragon, and I will return with our complimentary, our red dragon back to your blue. So one dragon mascot to another. You all are absolutely welcome from Good Enough stream here to the Hero Zone. Welcome everyone. Valexian says, I love when there's multiple entrances that are all correct, but lead to different orders of challenge. Maybe the castle has an east and west entrance, and one is guarded by a giant dog, while the other is patrolled by a group of guards. Both lead to a maze. If you try the dog first, you may just alert the guards. If you deal with the guards first, they may miss the dog's feeding time, and now the dog is not only protecting its territory, but is also hungry. Dragons are the bestest, says Good Enough. John says, this can be great, but recently I had a game where the DM pulled this, and the monster was really cool, but it wasn't good, because I had fun tracking the first monster, only for it to die to one that wasn't even hinted at. Yeah, so pulling something like that, if you're gonna do that, be careful, because it can lead to that sort of like, okay, well, I get it, but I was having fun with the thing. Is there some sort of a payoff for that switcheroo? And Hatter HRG, hello, howdy, hi. Thank you very much for the re-up. And Hatter rocking that white belt with the blue stripe. Heck yeah. Let's give a shout out also to a fellow streamer, Hatter, HRG for Hat Rack Gaming. There we go. Thank you for popping in. Yeah, so good enough. We're talking about dungeon design philosophy right now. We haven't started plotting out a dungeon. We're talking about dungeons as a concept. Not just as, okay, I get it. It's an underground place and we're going to crawl through. There's a skeleton and a barrel and there's probably going to be a dragon in there somewhere. Those are elements of a type of dungeon, but we're asking the philosophical questions of what is a dungeon and how can we design dungeons with with this methodology, but can ultimately lead to a variety of dungeons. So we go through the entrance with the Guardian and then into some sort of a puzzle or role-playing challenge, or you can flip it around as the first and second room of the 5-room dungeon concept. Then somewhere we have I didn't give the examples as well. A chessboard floor with special squares, a hallway of colored portals with an old riddle telling them which way to go. A corrupt city official can give the permits to enter the radiation sector. If this goes, wait, that's a puzzle or a riddle? Yeah. How are you gonna get this? Pass? How are you gonna get into the place you need to go? And so you need to find out a way to bribe or extort or redeem the city official so you can get the permit to enter the radiation sector. That is still a puzzle or a role-playing challenge. The apartment building has buzzers for tenants, but the quarry is using an assumed name. So in this case, who you're trying to find in the apartment complex, you're seeing a whole list of names, but you have to think about it. All right, our quarry is going under an assumed title. What can we put together? What do we know about our target? The chamber of the Ark is covered in venomous snakes that will shy away from open fire. Aha! The chamber of the Ark is covered in venomous snakes that will shy away from open fire. Does this sound familiar to anyone? You all know where that comes from? The floor is covered in pressure plates for dart traps that kobolds are light enough to ignore. Ah, wow, yeah. So we're taking stuff like that into consideration. The kobolds never have to worry about it. They're not heavy enough. But almost everyone else, almost all other humanoids that might be after them are. And so it's a natural defense. They can just run like nothing's happening. And if people are chasing them, they get turned into pincushions. Now the trick or setback that can go into the big swapperoonie in the fight that was brought up before, the big fish. This is where you raise the stakes. Something about the plan has gone wrong. Something the opposite of what they expected. Maybe the NPC they brought along gets kidnapped. Maybe they fight the big bad, but it's actually a minion pretending. This room is good for giving your players a second dose of fighting or puzzle, whichever they prefer. This is also a good opportunity to get players to waste some resources that could be useful in the big fight in room 4, such as using up their flaming oil on a troll when a mummy is the big bad evil guy. This is something that I also practiced in the campaign on stream. I would very much tenderize. I would tenderize the party and try and bait out a lot of their resources. Now, it had purpose more than just going, haha, this is hard for you. There was a point to it. It was more than just that, because it was still an exhilarating fight, if not against something, then a fight for survival. But it also raised the stakes. It made things a little bit more pressured. You can't just rely on dumping all your spell slots on the final boss, because you didn't have all your spell slots. So, examples. The hostages they rescued demand or plead to be taken back immediately before the heroes find the villain. This could even be that they're making a bunch of noise. And now, like, you wanted to rescue them. Pardon me. And it's not like they're not grateful for being rescued, but now you have a liability for the party. Because they might just make noise on their own, be insistent, they'll have needs, to eat or bathroom or to survive, and they might scream at any little noise because they're not seasoned adventurers. You found the Lich's lair, but he seems awfully weak. And isn't he a demi-lich? Contains a one-way exit, dumping some of the group back outside of room 1. The heroes found the data they need to steal, but it's encrypted, and the passwords are further inside. One of the NPCs that came along takes the magic dingus for himself and runs off. The heroes walk right into kobolds playing a sport with swinging boulders from high ledges. Now we're into the big climax of our dungeon. Here's the ringleader, the goblin chieftain, the big kahuna. Big O, it is showtime. Spend more of your efforts on tactics, set pieces, and showy effect on the fight in this room, because this is what the adventure module is named after. Make a detailed map with interesting terrain and usable props for jumping or tripping over, grabbing, swinging. Start or end with some acting. Maybe the boss needs to stall to finish preparing, or to allow for reinforcements. Maybe there's hapless minions to toy with when their leader falls. The big bad is going to have powers that are beyond the monsters and traps encountered up until now. The lair is trapped, and only the big bad evil guy knows how to get around the room safely. Previous rooms that might have clues for the weakness of the main villain. The evil guy was the holy what's-it, or has the holy what's-it in his grasp and threatens to destroy it. The kobold chief has a magic staff, a pet that steals players' gear, and a rolling boulder trap that his followers can avoid by climbing ledges and using ranged attacks. Then the reward and revelation. Here's where you sucker punch the players. The big fight is over. Time to pat each other on the back for another great job. Or is it? It doesn't have to be an actual fifth room. It could be a plot twist that reveals itself after the big fight in room 4. Maybe the players will find the plot hook to the next adventure, or clues about a major plot arc over the campaign. Or maybe the real villain will reveal himself and twirl his mustache. Yes. That's kind of the big fish reveal. A trap is sprung which reanimates the big guy from room 4. Bonus treasure is uncovered which leads elsewhere, such as part of a treasure map or a deed to some land. After being weakened by the fight in room 4, the bad guy uncloaks from following the heroes and snatches the what's-it. The captured princess wasn't kidnapped, but ran away from home to elope with the bad guy. The true gruesome meaning behind a national holiday is discovered. Dun dun dun. What are we talking about this week? Holidays? The alien's language is deciphered, revealing that the hostilities were all just a misunderstanding. A prophecy comes true, but not the way the players expected. The kobold chief was pressured into raiding the human villages by a young white dragon who demanded tribute. Or the princess is in another castle. Well, hi and bye to you. So hopefully this refresher about dungeon concepts, if we go through the 7 things, the 7 things to consider as a checklist for your dungeon: something to steal, something to be killed, something to kill you, different paths, someone to talk to, something to experiment with, and something players probably won't find. We have that, and we can spread that through at least this template of the 5-room dungeon, even if there's 10 rooms or more, all right? But this is a series of plot that is going to unfold and will tell the story of the dungeon. And if you remember, when we started this conversation, we come back here to the Dungeon Master's Guide, From Whence We Came. And you can see that there are some mechanics where if you are stuck in your dungeon creation, this can prompt you to ask some of the questions to tell that story, and will give you guidance in what you can include with your dungeon checklist, or how to structure your 5-room dungeon concept. Do you know who created the dungeon? What was the purpose? Either what was the purpose and or what is the purpose of the dungeon currently? What about the history of this place? There are clues to be discovered all throughout it that'll tell a story. Could reveal the weakness of the BBEG. It could be that something to find, or something that probably won't be found. Or, you know, the big secret to why we have the holiday, and things like that. Hey, Capo. Welcome back. It's not over yet. Velixion says, remember, if the BBG isn't moving, why would your party be? This may be a turn-by-turn game, but movement is part of a turn. Sometimes you gotta reel in the hook for the fish to bite. If the fish is stationary, if it's a stationary slap fest, you're doing something wrong. I never thought that before. The kobolds being too light for their traps. Yeah, and that goes into our holiday colors for the gnomes and the dwarves. Actually play into the fact that both of them have dark vision and don't need light. So it's a celebration of darkness, and so their colors are actually leaning into what they see in their dark vision. Because in this world, it could be just generic gray tone, right? A black and white dark vision. If you want it to be like infravision, where it's red and black, like a virtual boy, or if you want it to be green and black, like our modern night vision goggles, you know, this is your world. Do gnomes see in green and black in the dark? Do dwarves see in red and black in the dark? Is everything some other shade? Or is dark vision actually more of a thermal vision for one or all of the races in your world that have dark vision? And so, if you can imagine like the different predator vision styles from the movie, can you imagine as a DM describing a dungeon with just a thermal feedback? It is a form of dark vision, absolutely. But it's an interesting way to play into what are the current conditions of this place, of the setting, the people who live here, especially the players who might have come to engage in this dungeon, in this riddle, as a part of your world. Hey, a microbiologist joins us. My first dungeon was made for the players to discover some useful and not so useful information via the form of fortune cookies, and for them to get enough food to make it to the first village. And I just had my fortune cookie. Ow, hey. No, stop it. My chair does not need your claws in it, man. And my fortune tonight was you are soon going to change your personal line of work. And I like hanging out with you all. So if it's going to change, I hope it's going to change in a really cool way. And Keys, this doesn't just have to be D&D. That's the common medium through which a lot of us have met and we can talk. But these are concepts that can go way beyond Dungeons and Dragons. Standard Friday night game, we did things and moved along. How goes the People McNugget prep? We're having a very fun workshop, Hatter. And hey, D&D Comic, good to see you. Do not take the Mario route and have bottomless pits mixed with correct or alternate paths and no way to tell them apart. Mario only gets away with it because it grants the players multiple lives, and even then it's annoying. And Tamashi Saka. If I mispronounced that, please correct me. We're going over the basics of dungeons, and then we're going to build a dungeon together in the workshop next. Some of their fortunes have been, they say holy water is useful for removing those hard to shift items. And herrings are delicious, herrings. Herrings are delicious, especially the red ones. Tamashi Saka says, correct and awesome, because I'm trying to learn to DM. I haven't run anything yet. You have found the correct place, Tamashi, as we are primarily a workshop channel here. And you are welcome to ask questions along the way, because we're going to go into some dungeon building here next. So, things for you all to consider if you want to review it. This is the dungeon checklist that I presented. And if you want to review the 5-room dungeon concept, you can go here as well. And of course, this will be up on YouTube. Hi, everyone in the future on YouTube. This will be up on YouTube. You can always reference it. And it is also a part of our channel content on Discord, where all the links and all the stuff that we've built will be listed for you all to access, because you can always go back and watch the videos or download what we've done as templates for things on your own. Yeah, I understand that frustration, Velixion. I can come up with a story and characters and build maps, but encounters and such would be interesting to learn. All right, as we go through this, and Tamashi, for this workshop and any others into the future that you may join us on, you can always ask questions along the way. I am happy to answer them. Yep, there we go. Dragon MDK says, hi, future me watching this on YouTube. All right, I'm going to get up real quick. I'm going to take one more stretch break. I'm going to refresh myself because I mysteriously, I don't know where the contents of this apple cinnamon cider soda went. And when we come back, I would like to work with you to make a dungeon. And if you're not sure, why do I have a map of Iceland and we're talking about a dungeon? Well, here's the cliffhanger. You're going to have to hang out and find out why.